What if the most heartbreaking goodbyes aren't spoken, but hummed? That's what truly twisted the knife. Not the shimmering emerald gown, nor the precarious stilettos. Certainly not the late hour etched into the clock face. It was Marlowe Sterling's soft, tuneless hum as she effortlessly zipped up her dress, as if this was merely another Tuesday evening ritual. I stood in the bedroom doorway, watching her reflection in the full-length mirror, her slender fingers reaching for her fragrance. Jasmine. I hadn't caught a whiff of that particular scent in years. It was the perfume she favored when we first met, back when my opinions on anything, even her choice of fragrance, held weight. Tonight she didn't even register my presence. There was no nervous fidgeting, no furtive glances, no frantic check for lipstick smudges, just an unsettling, serene confidence. And that confidence, stark and unwavering, laid bare every ugly truth. Yet I found myself asking, my voice flat, "Heading out?" She didn't flinch, didn't even bother to turn around. "Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a date," she replied, her tone as casual as discussing the weather. Finally, she pivoted, offering a genuine smile. But it wasn't the radiant beam I used to receive for remembering her favorite coffee order or a forgotten anniversary. This was the kind of smile you offer when your heart has already evacuated the premises. I wish I could recount a scene of dramatic rage, shattered glass, thrown accusations, or a breakdown into tears. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where we kept birthday candles, selected one, and lit it. Marlowe, now visibly confused, followed. "What exactly are you doing?" she asked. I placed the small, flickering candle in the exact center of our dining table, the very table where we'd shared countless Sunday night pasta dinners, where we once slow danced in our socks because the old stereo refused to connect. "Celebrating," I answered. "Celebrating what?" Her voice had dropped, softer now, edged with caution. "The precise moment I stopped loving you." She froze, staring at me, and for the first time in an eternity, truly years, she was speechless. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hurl accusations of infidelity, though the glaring evidence surrounded us. I didn't ask for his name. I didn't inquire if she'd be back, because in that moment I simply didn't care anymore. Not out of spite, but from a vast, aching emptiness. She fumbled for her purse, her fingers clumsy with the strap. "Caleb, I didn't mean—" "You did," I interrupted, cutting her off cleanly. "And you should go. Wouldn't want to keep him waiting." She didn't hum on her way out. The front door clicked shut, but the echo of her retreating heels vibrated in the silence, lingering far longer than it should have. I remained in the kitchen, the candle flame dancing on the table, uncertain whether to live or die. Poetic, I suppose. Copper Doggett, our scruffy terrier mix, patted over and leaned against my leg, his soft fur a silent comfort. He always sensed trouble before I did. That should have been my first warning, months ago, when he stopped greeting her at the door. I didn't sit, I didn't eat. I didn't switch on the television or track her location like a desperate fool. I simply grabbed my jacket and walked out. No note, no grand exit speech, no packed suitcase. Just me, my wallet, car keys, and a profound silence she hadn't earned. I drove for nearly an hour, destination unknown, past quiet suburban streets bathed in the glow of porch lights, past bustling diners where couples shared laughter over pie and coffee, past gas stations where tired clerks offered half-hearted stares. I eventually pulled into a parking lot overlooking the tranquil old lake where we'd once escaped, back when love didn't feel like an elaborate performance. I sat there for an eternity, trying to comprehend how I had shrunk so significantly within my own marriage. She used to gaze at me as if I held her entire world. I know it sounds dramatic, but I wasn't always this easily overlooked. I was once the man who could make her snort laugh, the man who memorized her complicated coffee order and tucked silly sticky notes into her lunchbox. I was the one who, despite having no earthly idea what a reading nook was, built her one. Now I was a mere placeholder, the man she dismissively told "don't wait up," as if I were a roommate, not her husband. I powered down my phone, not airplane mode, completely off. I wanted no part of her messages. No, where are you? No, can we talk? And certainly no thinly veiled lies masquerading as concern. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a dingy roadside motel 2 towns away, the kind with threadbare green carpets and a vending machine that exclusively accepted quarters. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation. This is what happens when you stop fighting for someone who stopped fighting for you. That's when it truly hit me. I wasn't angry. I was profoundly relieved. Not because of her betrayal, that still sat in my chest like a twisted blade, each deep breath a fresh wound, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't terrified of losing her. I was liberated from the Sisyphean task of trying to earn a love that had clearly been gifted to someone else. She thought her date would finally break me. She had no idea I was already gone. By the time I returned home the next morning, the sun was spilling across the driveway, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Our house, once our sanctuary, looked identical from the outside, yet it no longer felt like mine. I stood at the door, key in hand, unsure if I even wanted to cross the threshold. Eventually I did. She wasn't home yet. No surprise there. The living room still held the faint, lingering scent of her jasmine perfume, the one she'd spritzed before stepping into another man's arms. I stood there, listening to the fridge hum, the clock tick. For a fleeting second, I pictured her getting ready last night. Did she text him while I was in the next room? Did she giggle as she typed, "He has no idea"? Did she feel a surge of power, walking out the door, believing she had every thread perfectly woven? Well, now, the loom was mine. I didn't destroy the place. I didn't toss her clothes onto the lawn or descend into soap opera theatrics. But I did begin the methodical process of dismantling her presence, piece by piece. Her yoga mat from the garage, her collection of quirky mugs, that ridiculous neon Love Wins sign she'd bought at a thrift store and absolutely refused to let me take down. I yanked it from the wall and tossed it into the closet. It was petty, yes, but it felt incredibly good, like peeling her off the walls, one memory at a time. Then I simply sat down and waited, not like a predator nor a broken man, just calm. I wanted to see her face when she walked through that door and found nothing waiting for her. No confrontation, no argument, no sobbing husband begging for explanations, just silence. She arrived a little after 10 a.m., still in the same heels and gown. Her hair was disheveled now, her eyes shadowed with regret, or perhaps just exhaustion. She hadn't expected me to be there. Her keys clattered to the floor when she saw me sitting at the dining table, nursing a half-eaten piece of toast. "Caleb," she whispered, my name sounding foreign on her tongue. I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at her. Truly looked. There was no longer any mystery, no curiosity, only absolute clarity. "You stayed out," I stated simply. Her lips parted, but I continued. "You don't have to lie. I don't care if you went to dinner or wherever you ended up. Just be honest. Did you sleep with him?" Silence. A held breath. A faint clench of her jaw. "Does it matter?" she whispered. And that was it. That was the final conclusive nail. Because if she had cried, if she had screamed or begged or even cowardly denied it, perhaps a fragment of me might have believed there was something left to salvage. But that question, does it matter? It told me everything I needed to know. I stood up, nodded slowly, and picked up the bag I'd packed earlier from the floor, lightly just as I'd planned. "Yeah," I said, walking past her. In less than 24 hours, everything he thought he knew about love would shatter. It matters, but not in the way you think. And I left. I didn't venture far that morning, just drove aimlessly, pulling over only when a coffee shop caught my eye. A quiet place at the edge of town with mismatched chairs and a chalk-scrawled menu. I sat by the window, observing strangers living lives I no longer recognized. A couple across from me laughed over spilled sugar. An older gentleman read his newspaper in tranquil silence, offering polite nods to every passing waitress. And there I was, gripping a paper cup as if it were the last tether connecting me to the earth. Her voice echoed in my head, not the words themselves, but the tone, that strange amalgam of defiance and defeat. Does it matter? It did. It mattered more than she could ever comprehend. Not because I needed confirmation of her actions. I already knew. But because I needed to hear her say it. I needed her to admit the line had been irrevocably crossed, so I wouldn't feel insane for feeling so broken. After a few hours, I reactivated my phone. 8 missed calls, 3 texts, 1 voicemail. The texts weren't desperate. They were cold, almost annoyed. Can we talk? You're being dramatic. Come home so we can figure this out. She still believed I could be reasoned with, still believed the version of me who tolerated her emotional absenteeism would reappear, offering a half-hearted apology and a yearning for closure. That man was gone. I didn't reply. Not that day, not the next. But I did call someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Nicholas Finch, my oldest friend, one of the few who knew the Caleb I was before Marlowe. We hadn't connected much since she entered my life. She hadn't liked him. Said he was too cynical, too weirdly observant. Now I understood that was just code for, he sees right through me. When Nicholas answered, his voice crackled through the static as if no time had passed at all. Caleb, he said, you alive? I exhaled, a bitter smile touching my lips. Barely. I met him that evening at a downtown bar, a dive that smelled of stale beer and burnt pretzels. We didn't clink glasses. We didn't even sit at the bar. We found a secluded booth in the back, where no one could overhear what I was about to confess. I told him everything. The dress, the jasmine, the date. The moment she uttered it without a shred of shame, the moment I didn't crumble, the silence, the candle, every single detail. When I finally finished, Nicholas offered no pity. He didn't curse her name or trash talk. He just nodded slowly, his fingers drumming against the table. Then he posed a question I hadn't anticipated. Was this the first time she's done it, or just the first time she told you? And just like that, my stomach dropped again, because I didn't know. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. The truth, it hits hardest when you're not looking for it. And now I couldn't stop replaying all the late nights, the sudden weekend errands, the way she'd abruptly started guarding her phone like sacred scripture. It wasn't just the betrayal that wounded, it was the timeline. I had been grieving one night, one kiss, one solitary mistake. But what if it had been unfolding for months, for years? I felt sick, physically ill. That was the first time the tears actually came. Not loud, not theatrical, just a few quiet drops I let fall onto a cocktail napkin as Nicholas watched, saying nothing. He simply sat there with me, allowing the truth to settle like dust in a room I hadn't properly cleaned in a decade. And in that moment, I realized something truly awful. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. The next morning, Marlowe appeared at Nicholas's apartment. She hadn't called, hadn't texted. She simply materialized, knocking as if the world hadn't irrevocably shifted. Nicholas glanced through the peephole, giving me a look that silently asked, "Want me to send her away?" But I nodded. I needed to see her face again, not out of longing, but to confirm what my gut had already screamed. She hadn't come to apologize. She came to reclaim control. When she walked in, I barely recognized her, not because of her appearance. She was still Marlowe, still polished, still impeccably put together. But something in her eyes had changed. The usual arrogance was smudged, as if she'd just grasped the full weight of her actions, and worse, what she'd irrevocably lost. She didn't sit. She hovered near the wall like a stranger in a waiting room, arms crossed, keys still clutched in her hand, as if she never intended to stay long. Typical. She always entered conversations already halfway out the door. "Why are you ghosting me?" she demanded, her voice sharp with forced calm. "This isn't you." I leaned back on the worn couch, arms folded, and simply stared. "You're right," I said. "It's not. That version of me no longer exists." She flinched just slightly, but I saw it. She tried to pivot, slipping into that saccharine tone she employed whenever she needed to buy time. "Caleb, come on. We've been through so much. I thought we could talk this through like adults." I remained silent, allowing the quiet to stretch, so vast and uncomfortable that she was forced to fill it herself. It was one night, she finally said. And that's when my stomach churned, because now I knew she hadn't just gone on a date. She had crossed the line fully, physically, undeniably, and she still believed she could reel me back in with a diluted version of the truth. Here's what no one tells you about betrayal. It's rarely a single event. One night, I repeated, my voice now lower, colder. Do you even hear yourself? She rolled her eyes, but a flicker of panic danced in their depths. It didn't mean anything, Caleb. I needed to feel something again. You've been distant for months. You never look at me the same anymore. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with absolute chilling clarity. Do you want to know why I stopped looking at you like I used to? I asked. Because you were already gone. I just hadn't realized it yet. Marlo stepped forward, as if to touch my arm, but stopped herself. That hesitation spoke volumes. She was accustomed to winning arguments with proximity, with soft touches, with carefully manufactured tears. But none of that worked anymore. Her playbook was outdated and she knew it. Nicholas remained quietly in the kitchen, giving us space, but I knew he was listening. I didn't mind. He was the only one who'd witnessed the hollowed-out version of me, grieving a marriage that had been quietly rotting beneath fresh coats of denial. You said you needed to feel something, I continued, standing now, slowly, deliberately. But what about what I felt, Marlo? What about the nights you stared at your phone like it knew you better than I did? What about the version of me that tried to ask, tried to connect, and got shut out every single time? She shook her head like a child caught in a lie, attempting to twist the narrative again. I didn't plan to hurt you. I just didn't know how to talk to you anymore. No, I countered. You just didn't want to tell the truth because you liked the convenience of a loyal husband and the thrill of a stranger's hands. You liked being adored without having to earn it. She opened her mouth, but no words came. And for the first time, she looked like the true ghost in the room. After she left Nicholas's apartment, the silence she left behind felt heavier than her presence. She hadn't cried. That genuinely surprised me. Marlo always wielded tears like a weapon, timed, controlled, just enough to paint me as the villain. But this time, when her manipulations failed, she folded faster than I'd anticipated. There was no real apology, just a string of emotional excuses, stitched together with phrases like, "You've been distant," and "it didn't mean anything." But her eyes knew I wasn't buying it. You won't believe the final card she played and why it failed. Nicholas sat down next to me after the door clicked shut and silently handed me a beer. That was his way, quiet, blunt support. After a few sips, I finally asked the question I'd been evading for days. What if this wasn't the first time? Nicholas raised an eyebrow. You want the truth or the version that helps you sleep? The real one. He took a slow drink and didn't sugarcoat it. It wasn't the first time. You just finally caught her being bold about it. The words didn't sting as much as I thought they would. Deep down, I had already known. I recalled all the canceled weekend trips, the sudden new friends from yoga, the nights she came home too late and too happy. I had ignored it because admitting it meant confronting what I was too afraid to lose. But now that she was gone, I realized I hadn't lost anything real. Just an illusion I kept feeding because I didn't want to be alone. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about how fragile peace is, how one sentence, "I have a date," could shatter an entire history. But I wasn't broken anymore. I was awake, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, I drove back to the house, not for her, for closure. I walked through the door like a guest visiting a memory. Everything looked the same, but the soul of the place was missing. Her purse was on the counter. Her shoes were kicked off by the door, as if nothing had happened. I didn't touch anything. I went straight to the home office, pulled out an envelope I'd hidden months ago, the one containing copies of every important document, passwords, and a letter I'd written when I'd almost left the first time. I placed that envelope on the kitchen table, right beneath the candle I'd lit the night she told me about the date. Then I opened her laptop. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know, just once, for clarity. Her messages were still logged in. I didn't snoop for long, Didn't need to. What I saw confirmed everything Nicholas had said. There was more than one. Multiple names, months of flirtation, plans, pictures, hotel bookings. It was like falling down an elevator shaft made of screenshots. I closed the lid, took a deep breath, and left everything exactly where it was. I didn't delete anything. I didn't write any nasty messages. I didn't lash out. Instead, I took the spare house key off my ring, laid it next to the envelope, and locked the door behind me from the outside. But before I left, I did one last thing. I scheduled an email. Just one. It would send to her phone at precisely 6:40 p.m., the same time she'd told me she'd be out with a friend 2 months ago, the first night I now knew that she'd cheated. The email said only this: I finally felt something too. Freedom. I sat in the driver's seat across the street from our house. Engine off, phone in hand. It was 5:59. The email was scheduled. There was nothing else to say, nothing to explain, no apology I needed to send, no answer I was hoping to get. Still, I waited. I wanted to see her face when she read it. Not for revenge, not for closure, but because after all the silence and gaslighting, I deserved to witness the moment she realized I was truly gone. At 69 sharp, I watched her silhouette move across the living room window. She was holding her phone, barefoot, clad in one of those oversized sweaters she always wore when she was tired or feigning softness. The screen illuminated her face as she read the message. She didn't move for a few seconds. Then she dropped onto the couch as if someone had punched the air from her lungs. She stared blankly at the wall. No calls, no texts, just stillness. And then the unraveling began. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her legs curled up. Her body folded in on itself, as if someone had finally struck the core of her, the part she'd kept shielded behind sarcasm, distraction, and infidelity. She hadn't cried the night she told me about her date. She hadn't cried when I left, but now when she knew there was nothing left to control, she finally shattered. The shocking moment she realized everything was truly over. I drove off. That was the last time I saw her in person. Over the next few days, her messages arrived like waves during a storm. The first were defensive, cold, laden with blame. You're overreacting. We needed space. This wasn't some grand betrayal. Then came the ones soaked in confusion. Why are you acting like this? Why won't you talk to me? Where are you staying? But it was the final batch that hit hardest, not because I believed them, but because I used to be the version of myself who would have. Please, and she wrote, just talk to me. I'm sorry, I messed up. I didn't think you'd actually leave. That last line stayed with me, not for the apology, but for the raw confession buried within it. She didn't think I'd actually leave. She had tested the limits for so long, assuming I would always bend, always break, but never walk. And when I did, it was the one thing she couldn't argue with. Nicholas helped me find a place, a tiny furnished rental above an art studio downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The air didn't smell of lies. The bed didn't feel haunted. I kept it simple. A few clothes, a couple of books, a coffee maker, and Copper curled up on the old rug, finally sleeping peacefully again. I don't know what he knew or understood, but he stopped whining at the door. He stopped waiting for her to come home. I'd started going for long walks at night, not to escape the pain, but to process it. One evening, I passed a group of people laughing outside a bar, and I caught myself smiling. Not because I was happy, not yet, but because I felt light. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to tiptoe around moods or fake smiles at dinner tables. I was just free. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the rain tap against the window, I opened my phone and blocked her number. No ceremony, no anger, just one clean move. I didn't need her voice in my head anymore, trying to rewrite the story. She said she had a date. I gave her something better, a goodbye she could never rewrite. 2 months passed. That chapter, the one where I waited, doubted, begged for scraps of love, was finally behind me. I didn't flip the calendar anymore, wondering what anniversary I had to pretend mattered. I didn't wake up with dread, hoping today she'd finally choose me. The only thing I waited for now was my morning coffee to brew. Peaceful, boring, unremarkable, and yet somehow it felt like a luxury. I got a new job. Nothing fancy, but it forced me out of my head and into motion. I worked with my hands again, fixed things, saw progress, built furniture. The sawdust under my fingernails reminded me I could still create, still shape something real, even after so much had been broken. One afternoon, I stopped by a bookstore I hadn't visited in years. The same one Marlowe used to call dusty and depressing. I liked it. It was quiet, honest. I ended up talking to the woman at the counter, Dana, I later learned, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to prove anything. We just talked about old novels and coffee preferences. When she smiled, it wasn't flirtatious. It was human, kind, present. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't looking to replace Marlowe. I wasn't searching for revenge or a rebound or some dramatic, full-circle ending. I just wanted to live without pretending. And now, finally, I was. Think true healing is about forgetting? Here's why it's about remembering differently. I never responded to her last message, the one where she asked if I'd ever come back. Maybe she thinks I'm being cruel. Maybe she still spins her version of the story to friends, painting me as cold, distant, unwilling to forgive. But I don't need to defend myself anymore. I lived it, I survived it, and more importantly, I left it. Now when I walk past the mirror, I don't see the man who begged to be seen. I see someone who finally sees himself. So to the one who once looked at me and said, "I have a date," like it was a test she thought I'd fail. Thank you. Thank you for setting me free. Discover the unexpected path to freedom after losing everything.